Thanks, Mark. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Mark. Let me begin by acknowledging that we're meeting here on the land of the Ngunnawal people. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues who are in the room. Thanks so much for coming along. And of course, members of the community, leaders who have come here today to listen to what I hope's a thought-provoking speech. So I stand here at my first National Press Club address since the Coalition was narrowly returned, since the re-emergence of One Nation, since Brexit, since, of course, the election of Donald Trump, and since so many columns and articles and tweets have been written trying to make sense of it all. Many of you in this room have also been part of that. Now, the National Press Club describes itself as an institution that reaches the influencers and decision-makers of Australia. Federal and state MPs, political advisors, heads of departments, academics, journalists and, of course, the Federal Parliamentary Press Gallery. And it occurs to me that these are pretty much all the groups that Donald Trump rallied against during his now infamous presidential campaign, and he won. So we have to ask ourselves a question: why is it that the media establishment, a bit like politics, is so mistrusted by such a large section of the community? Most Australians firmly believe that we need a fiercely free and independent media to hold power, politicians to account. They just wish they had one. Yes, we've got many outstanding journalists in this country. Incidentally, most of them are women. But as an institution, the media, like politics, is in real trouble. The model for funding independent journalism has broken down. When I first took my seat in 2011, there were a number of experienced health reporters. It was my portfolio. They'd been around for decades. They knew their subject matter inside out. Most of them are gone now, and the people who are left behind are spread a mile wide and an inch deep. The model for independent media is in trouble. We don't have enough media diversity. So if you're a punter living in a capital city, the Murdoch press accounts for 2/3 of all circulation. It's often a choice of the big Murdoch paper or the little Murdoch paper. And in some ways, Donald Trump was right about the notion of fake news, but not in the way that he meant it. Much of what passes as news right now is opinion, it's speculation, it's gossip, it's just blatant cheerleading for your own side. It's anything but news. As a result, the public square has shrunk, and debates become more polarised, more divisive. We speak at each other rather than to each other, rather than with each other. So you'll forgive me, but this speech isn't for you, the influencers and decision makers of Australia. This is a speech that's for those young people who are being screwed over right now and see their future being ripped away. This is a speech for those many millions of Australians who have come here to make this island continent their home and have made us a better nation. It's a speech for those people who won't tolerate injustice, like the injustice of locking people up in prisons offshore or young kids in adult prisons here at home. And it's a speech for all those people who understand that we are the custodians of this fragile little blue planet of ours, and it's our responsibility to look after it. Now, anyone who stands at this podium and says, "I've got all the answers," is lying to you. We don't. What we do know is that the system is broken and that politics, as usual, just won't cut it anymore. The politics of wealth and privilege, separated from the people it's supposed to represent, it can't begin to offer a persuasive diagnosis, let alone the right treatment. For decades, our politics has been in the grip of neoliberalism. It's an ideology that's based on the singular assumption that humans are selfish individuals and that we're always in violent competition. It's an ideology that's defined by the sale of any public asset that isn't nailed down, that sees taxation and regulation and trade unions as the enemy. It's an ideology that says if only we relinquish total control to the market, that somehow wealth will magically trickle down and make us all better off. It's why the Coalition wants to give $50 billion in tax cuts to their big business mates rather than those people who need it, rather than investing in healthcare and education. It's an ideology that is so despised, so discredited, its impacts so widely felt, that the people of the United States chose to elect a narcissist, an unstable and dangerous man as their president to overturn it. But we've got a different path open to us. A path that doesn't turn Australians against each other. A path that recognises the economy exists to serve us rather than the other way around. A path that is based on love and compassion, not on hatred and division. And I've got great faith in our shared humanity, in our fellow citizens, to choose a path of decency. It's a path that's informed by evidence. Our origins as a cooperative species, that's what gave us an evolutionary advantage. Cooperation is woven into our very being. The principle of caring for others is a central tenet in all the world's religions. It's a central theme in all of our human stories. It's our economic and political system that is broken, not our fellow human beings. Just as we can choose love over hate, we can choose to focus on a broken system, to fix it, a system that privileges the rich and powerful over the rest of us. Our job in Parliament is to stand up to those powerful vested interests, to bring people together and to fix the democratic deficit. And that is our biggest challenge right now. We don't have a budget deficit. It is the democratic deficit that is our biggest problem. The first step has to be an end to the corrupting influence of political donations from the big end of town. We've got to get rid of big money politics. Let's just call them what they are. They're state-sanctioned bribery. Corporations aren't philanthropic entities. The reason they donate is because they expect a return on their investment. People often say to me they can't tell the difference anymore between the Coles and Woolies of politics. That's because regardless of who becomes the next Prime Minister, we're going to see the big donors knocking on their doors, expecting a return on their investment, wanting to collect the rent. The Greens have also led the charge in establishing a national anti-corruption watchdog, something that both Labor and Liberal have frustrated for many, many years. Corruption watchdogs have unearthed serious misconduct in state parliaments. Does anyone seriously believe that the federal parliament is somehow immune, that we're somehow different? Of course not. That's why going into this parliament, two of our key priorities are to end the corrosive influence of those big corporate donations and to establish a national anti-corruption watchdog. We're not going to give up on both of those things. But we won't just stop there. Just as we led the way with Senate voting reform and an end to the rort of parliamentary entitlements, we'll work to strengthen our democracy through proportional representation, fixed parliamentary terms. And let's be innovative in our parliament. Let's trial techniques such as deliberative democracy that puts everyday people at the heart of government decision-making. But neither of the old parties is interested in tackling the democratic deficit. It means giving over power. It does not serve their own narrow self-interest. Instead, when the Prime Minister and the opposition leader was here only a few short weeks ago, they promised jobs, jobs, jobs. Have we got a deal for you? What neither leader was honest enough to say is that our labour market has changed for good. Rapid globalisation and a culture where employers see wages as nothing more than a cost to be pushed down to raise shareholder profits. What it means is that hundreds of thousands of Australians have found themselves out of work and scared senseless about what the future holds for them and for their families. The rise of digital and automated technologies means that up to 5 million existing jobs in this country may be lost in the next 10 years. So how about we start a conversation about the future of work in this country? And how about we question the entrenched political consensus that a good life can only come from more work, from working harder? How about we have a discussion that includes the things we really value in life? Spending time with our friends and family, relationships, leisure, volunteering, contributing to your local community, creativity, the simple things that actually make us happy. You know, the important things. We rightly talk about the 16% of people who want to work more hours. But what we don't hear about is from the more than 1 in 4 Australians who say, we want to work less. A 4-day working week or a 6-hour day. It might actually make us happier. It might create more opportunities for others who want more work. It might reduce the costs of full-time childcare. I mean, many members of the business community are already doing this. Some companies have already implemented a 3-day working week. As part of that discussion, let's think bigger. Let's talk about guaranteed adequate income. We've got many countries around the world trialling models of a social safety net designed to look after people in a 21st century economy where work is changing radically. It's interesting, isn't it, that we're so quick to create a trial for quarantining Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander welfare, despite the evidence against it, but we won't seriously contemplate looking at some of the outcomes of those international trials that look at universal basic income. We know that a secure income could drive innovation and research. It won't consign people to poverty. It will enhance creativity and help us reset what is actually meaningful in our lives, rather than just assuming, all of you in this room, people watching today, we're just units of economic output. We're so much more than that. Let's pair it with greater investment in education. Let's reskill people in those industries that are declining. Let's focus on our natural strengths in Australia, services sector, in health and education, in aged care, in renewable energy, in sustainable agriculture. We've got all the ingredients we need to rethink the future of work in a way that takes care of people and the planet that we depend upon. Now, the people who created the dog-eat-dog society that so many of us now resent, those powerful vested interests, they'll tell us it's all a pipe dream. Don't believe them. They want you to believe that you don't have a choice, that we can't change course, because it serves their narrow self-interest. Housing, jobs, universal education and healthcare, a decent social safety net, a healthy planet to sustain us. That was the compact with my generation, and the drawbridge is now being pulled up after us. I refuse to be part of a generation of political leaders who'll be the first in modern history to hand down worse living conditions to future generations than we enjoyed. We Greens won't preside over a political and economic system that is designed to entrench rising inequality, but that selfishly refuses to act. And that's why we've got a comprehensive plan to address housing affordability. We'll be releasing that shortly. Not only does it include reform of negative gearing and capital gains tax reform, and we're proud to have led the charge on those issues, but also a transition plan for the states to remove the third tax barrier to affordable housing, That's stamp duty. Stamp duty is a bad tax. It raises the price of housing. It stops people from moving between homes or downsizing even when they want to. It's about time we levelled the playing field and got rid of it. And speaking of levelling the playing field, if we're going to avoid turning this intergenerational divide into a chasm, it's time we had a debate around inheritance taxes for the super wealthy. Australia is one of the few countries that does not tax pre-existing wealth. So if you work hard, you earn a solid salary, you get taxed more than if you're lucky enough to inherit a string of old money assets. During my last speech here at the Press Club, I announced the Greens' plan for a Buffett rule that closes loopholes that allow wealthy people to avoid paying their fair share of tax. In some instances, avoiding paying tax altogether. As we did with capital gains tax reform, with negative gearing, with our call for a banking royal commission, I'm really pleased that we've helped to trigger a rethink, at least on one side of politics. But I do say to all sides, words are wind. If you say you care about inequality, but you give a whopping great big tax cut to the richest 20% of Australians. See, I reckon the old parties have been worked out by average Australians. They know that the privatisation of essential services has increased the concentration of wealth in fewer and fewer hands, and it's left customers to foot the bill. That's why we believe the time's come for a people's bank, one that injects real competition into the banking sector. Imagine real help for people buying their first house, for people in regional areas. Imagine a bank that pursues social objectives like housing affordability, not just profit-driven ones. Which bank? A people's bank. A few days ago, we detailed our plans to increase the Medicare levy for high-income earners, raising more than $13 billion over the forward estimates. We did it because providing a tax break to high-income earners who take out private health insurance does nothing to take the pressure off our public hospital system, and in many cases it just forces people to buy a product they don't want or need. Let's face facts. For most people, private health insurance has become a waste of money. Every year the premiums go up, the level of cover goes down, and when you actually need to use it, you're often faced with whopping great big out-of-pocket costs. I'll just say, when it comes to healthcare, the US is not a model that we should be following. I think it's time for Malcolm Turnbull and Bill Shorten to have the courage to stand up to corporate lobbyists, to start looking after people rather than subsidising the profits of private health insurers. Now, we can have all of the reforms in the world to address inequality, but they will come to nothing if we don't find the political will to address the great existential challenge we now face as a species. We're reaching a tipping point in our climate system where it will soon spiral beyond our control. But because this is a crisis of our own making, it's also one that we can solve with concerted action. There's no technical limit to moving to a renewable energy future. Don't buy that nonsense. There's no technical limit to powering our lives with clean energy from the sun and wind. If we want it, we can choose to live in a world where we protect our ancient forests and mountain ranges, our flowing rivers, our precious reefs. Or we can choose coal and gas. Almost everyone now accepts that coal does not have a long-term future. All we're really arguing about is the funeral date. But while Labor and Liberal continue to accept those massive corporate donations from big coal and gas, they'll continue to pursue the fossil fuel lobby's agenda. They'll remain hell-bent on approving the Adani coal mine, a mine that, if it goes ahead, will contribute to the death of the Great Barrier Reef, plain and simple. The obstacles to making the transition to a clean energy economy are political. They're not technological. But we have to act now. The window's closing. We Greens know that to get the sort of change we need, we have to work from both within the system and also from without. In the Senate, we've stopped some of this government's worst policies, including its cruel budget cuts, which would have seen people pay more to go and see a doctor, which would have forced young people to pay up to $100,000 for a university degree. We Greens in the Parliament have delivered climate change laws, Medicare-funded dental care for children. We've passed laws to crack down on multinational tax dodgers, to make our Parliament more democratic, to help farmers get their fruit off trees to the market by finding a way through the backpacker tax. However, I have to say, one of my proudest moments was leading our team out of the Senate in response to Pauline Hanson's hateful first speech. It was a gesture of protest. It was a gesture of resistance in the nation's parliament. It was an act of solidarity for those millions of people who would hear the echoes of their own past in her words. People like my mum, who don't just hear a bigoted woman attacking Muslims, but they hear the Catholic nun on her first day of high school saying to her, "Not another boatload of you bloody Italians." You see, these words have consequences. Mum remembers that. She tells me that story. And over the past 12 months, I've spoken to many young people who have shared the impact that the current debate is having on them. One of those people is Nada. Nada, why don't you stand up? Come over here. Come to the front. Now, Nada told me her story, and it's really powerful, but I want Nada to share her story with you today. I don't want to speak for people, I want to hear from them. Nada, come up and say a few words.
Thank you. I am tired of being spoken about. My fate in the hands of people who don't understand my contributions, my passions, and my concerns. Because more often than not, people up here on this stage and in Parliament attempt to shape my future without making me a part of the conversation. My name is Nada, and it is an honour to be on this platform to share my story. As a young Australian, a passionate engineer and a dedicated community representative, I have grave concerns about our responses to issues impacting my generation. While people are busy politicising Australia's energy industry, I am working to create a more energy sustainable future. While they forget we are on stolen land, I refuse to move forward without learning about traditional and innovative Indigenous practices of sustainability. And while they pretend like global warming isn't real, I am working on a local level to better our response and protect our environment. Because this is a world my generation will be leading soon, and we don't deserve to inherit such a mess. There are many young people like me who are trying to create a nation that acknowledges our history, celebrates diversity, and thrives on equality. But every time we take a step forward, there are forces of misinformation that push us miles back. As a young Muslim woman in this country, my right to simply exist is constantly under fire and occasionally under threat. I am a regular victim of casual and impersonal racism on public transport, in the supermarket, walking down the street. And it hurts no less each time. I not only receive snide remarks in public places, but I've also received more violent threats. I have been chased down the CBD streets by a man screaming that he wanted to kill me because of the apparent bomb under my hijab. But this isn't the Australia I've grown up in. It's not the future that we want, and young people across the country are fighting every day to change our path. Together, we are each other's keepers. We are each responsible for what is happening down the street, beneath the Earth's surface, or across the seas. As a community, we have become so focused on defining our differences that we've forgotten about the power we have if we work as a collective. We Australians have a lot to be proud of, and it's time we capitalise on our strengths, truly understand one another, and create a more inclusive, innovative, and relevant future for generations to come. So I ask today that you take the time to hear and understand others, to bring people together, and to give us hope for our future. Thank you.
Hey, wouldn't it be great if the media gave as much space to Nada's story as it gives to those people who don't want to hear? Wouldn't that be a nice change? You see, Nada gives me hope for the future. I genuinely believe in the decency of people. I genuinely believe that most people want to do the right thing by others, not just for themselves. I genuinely believe that people want to do the right thing by future generations, by the natural world. I genuinely believe that we share the same hopes and dreams and that we're all connected to a greater whole. As Nada said, retreating from the world's not an answer. Our challenges are global in nature. Whether it's climate change, whether it's refugees, whether it's the failed approach on drugs, whether it's nuclear disarmament, whether it's the spread of diseases, there's no retreating from the world. We are connected to it. Instead of turning inwards, instead of building walls, let's turn outwards, let's build bridges. That's why in a few weeks I'm going to attend the Global Greens Conference in Liverpool, where Greens parties from around the world will continue to meet and build a progressive international movement. And I look forward to telling you about this on my return. Let me just finish by saying it's our system that's broken, not our people. It's not working for our common humanity, and we don't have to accept it. We know that the global people-powered movements of the last century, where millions of people marched and campaigned together for women's rights, for civil rights, for workers' rights, for peace, for nuclear disarmament, to protect our environment, they showed us that collectively people can turn the tide of history. Now is the time to turn that tide again, by resisting the story that those vested interests tell about us and the world they would have you believe we live in, and for us to choose who we are and the world that we want to create together. Thanks so much.